Well, good evening, everybody. Paul Horsley here with Dave Forbes. We're excited to have you join us tonight. It is Money Monday with the Financial Prodigy, and we're excited that you could join us, and we're excited to have our guest speaker tonight. He comes from out west, and he is the CEO of his company, Advanced Agent Services. And as you know, we're all about IBC, or the infinite banking concept. And we thought tonight it would be really cool to let you guys in on one of the ways we help design and build our infinite banking policies. It's a tool that you just can't hardly live without when you're doing this, if you really want to bring it up. And I met Nicholas, I don't know, about 6 years ago, and he was introduced to me from another practitioner, IBC practitioner, and he said to me, if you really want to take this thing to another level, you got to use this guy's software. And so he introduced me to Nicholas, and Nicholas kind of walked me through his product. And so we took advantage of it and have been using it ever since. So David, do you have anything to say before we get rocking on this deal?
Oh, I just want to welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. The COVID has made our little Monday night get-togethers a great thing, and I'm glad you guys are here. Welcome.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. So we're trying to give you guys just a little bit more information each week as we move forward. And by the way, might as well share this with you. We won't be meeting next week because it's Memorial Weekend and Memorial Day. So not that we're already home and stuck here already barbecuing, but I'm sure everybody will be doing things. So anyway, without further ado, Nicholas, would you like to take it from here? I will go ahead and help you share your screen. All right, there you go, sir.
Okay, here we go.
And I would ask everybody to mute themselves if you haven't already.
Mute.
All right, so can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna analysis, and it has the basic information. We have the date of birth, and that will come out and actually calculate every time you open this to the 10th of a year, because we know that there are certain times when if someone's doing something with their 401k, they have to be 59 and a half, right? So we have a place for follow-up notes, and then finally basic information on take-home pay, if they have a life insurance policy, if there's going to be something done with that, and finally the inputs. So the inputs has total assets, debts, and then sequencing. And it's important to have the sequencing of the debts. We did a lot of research on it and found out that if you take smallest to largest, it's what's called a snowball. Well, I wanted to make sure that that was the most efficient way to do this. And after about 8 hours of testing everything from the length of loans to the size of the monthly payment to the interest rates, all those combinations, and it ended up, as it turns out, smallest to largest is invariably probably the most efficient. There are some one-offs, of course. That's never a hard, fast rule, but typically it will just sequence that and end up giving you the smallest to largest, and that's usually the best. So that sequence is here with the Kia Soul, the Visa, MasterCard, and on here you can see this. And we review the mortgages. In this case, there's a primary mortgage of $188,000 left. The system has calculated there's about 238 months left to pay off on this. Their monthly payment is $1,250, interest rate 5 and a loan length of 30 years. It is sequence 8. It's usually, because this is usually the largest, it's the last one in this sequence. We have a second mortgage here of a HELOC, which is interest only. And so the system calculates what the monthly payment is. And so it'll go through and tell them where that is in the sequence. Next, we have 3 credit cards. And I know you can see them here. The system again sequenced those smallest to largest. And then we have 2 vehicles, a Dodge Charger and a Kia Soul. And so those are in, and we have a student loan, these pesky student loans that we need to get rid of. And in some cases, they can be delayed. So we actually have a delayed ability to set this and say, all right, it doesn't start until maybe June of 21. And so it will then inject itself into the sequence at that point. Then we have one recurring debt, which is in a year or so, we're going to buy another car. So that gives you the ability to have some flexibility and see what this is going to look like in the future. So we have one, what was called recurring or future debt, and it's a Kia Soul. So with the assets, I think that we did, so we have some savings. They were contributing $100 a month. Putting $100 a month in a savings account that's getting you a whopping 0.25% annual APR is just not a good use of funds, especially when you've got debt that can be offset. So we're going to earmark that to be used. They're also contributing to a 401k, but as it turns out, this $505 would be much better used in the system rather than going towards a 401k. And we can run this both directions to see which one is better. And so in this case, we're going to leverage that to come in here. When you start understanding the 401ks, you can find out that typically the matches and a lot of the contributions ends up going for fund management, and it gets offset very quickly till the point where it's, a lot of times it's almost a wash. Finally, we liquidated we said to liquidate 55,000 from a retirement account, and that's going to jumpstart the program, but we're not going to use this all at once. As it turns out, we liquidate 55,000. We're only going to need 12,000 for the annual premiums the first year. So we actually earmark 40,000 of that for use for future premiums. So you don't need to liquidate that all at once. You can actually just liquidate 15,000. We have 12,000 for the premiums, and we did liquidate 3,000 to jumpstart the program and use that to start paying down some debt. Then I think we did this just to make it even. An even $1,000 a month is going back into the policy. They did have some discretionary income, so we earmarked $251. They were overpaying credit cards by $144. The contribution, which is this $100, and this $505 is $605, which you see here, and then so a total of $1,000 a month coming back into the program. So those are the basic inputs. As it turns out, we did a $12,000 annual premium, and with a 4,800 base, that's a 60-40 split. And so there's 60% is going into the paid up edition, 4,800 into the base. Once we have all of this information, then we can run the scenario and see how it'll perform. We've got a couple of different methods we can do. There are 3 methods. Use all cash values available to pay premiums. We can do all new money, which a lot of people do that have got discretionary, and so that they're putting just pumping a ton of money into these things. Or we can do each year at a time, which gives you a combination of these 2, so it's completely variable. So whatever that scenario is, we've got the options to be able to run that. So in this case, we're going to use all available cash values to pay premiums. And then there's this thing called the miscellaneous account. The miscellaneous account is kind of a fictitious or an ethereal account. It may or may not be real. We recommend that you as a client, have an extra checking account or savings account that's earmarked for this, especially when the system shows you're going to be putting money into it. And let me explain that. If you take out a loan for $10,000 and you're putting $2,000 a month back into the policy, in a year, you're going to put $12,000 in there. Well, the problem is that you only took out 10, so now there's going to be $2,000 that's going to be left over. In order to make sure that that gets set aside because we're going to use it, we call it this miscellaneous account, and that'll show up. So we say set that aside, and we're going to use it for premiums and then debt if there's more in it than what you need for premiums. You can just earmark it to accumulate, or you can mark it just to be used for paying down debt. If you're using it to pay premiums first, you can say, no, just use that for debt. In this case, we're going to use it for used premiums and then debt. Now, when we ran this, when we first started, you'll see a little, but that's been a standing joke with this because spreadsheets, and
you
can take and do a spreadsheet.
You were breaking up for the last 15 seconds. You want to repeat everything?
Sure.
Okay.
In the run analysis, I don't know if you can see this, fasten your seatbelt or not, but that became a standing joke because this does it so fast. But before this, with formulas and columns and all that stuff to get some kind of in the ballpark number. But it was a lot of work. Once they put this in, they said it was like literally, the acceleration was so fast that you get whiplash. So we just said fasten your seatbelt, because this system will take all those inputs, your policy premiums and the cash values, and in about 4.5 seconds will give you the results. And so here we have the results. So we have the Kia Soul, a balance of $44.73, payment of $322. It had 14 months left. It actually gets paid off in month 1. So next month that would get paid off. Next we have the Visa of $49.82, and it will get paid off actually in month 3. So we're going to pay a bunch of it down, and I'll show you that. And in 2 more payments, that's going to be gone. The next MasterCard is $5,000. It gets paid off month 13. The other MasterCard, it gets paid off in month 13. The Dodge Charger gets paid down, and then it, due to natural, once we pay it down, it actually accelerates and gets paid off in month 20. So instead of 40 months, it gets paid off in 20 months. The HELOC, that was a interest only, so in 10 years that was going to convert to a 30-year amortization. It actually gets paid off in 31 months. The student loan, that pesky thing, is gone in 49 months, and this primary residence, it is gone in 83 months. All from a $12,000 annual premium that we actually run at paid up additions just for 4 years, and then we drop the paid up additions. Obviously, this would even get faster if we continued the paid up additions. But again, we do everything in a conservative basis. These numbers are conservative. If you did everything just like the system said, you would actually beat these numbers. So what we find here is your current assets are listed at $510,000. In 8 years, with this plan, they will have jumped to $862,000. Those numbers are right here. That's actually a 69% increase in your net worth. That's an annual growth rate of 6.8%. We calculate interest saved, and in 96 months, you will have actually saved $72,176 that would have gone to somebody else. As it is, we short-circuited that, and that money did not get spent and sent to someone else. By the time you get done with this, you end up with $5,579 of what we call a tailwind coming back into your own account, building your wealth. So we start out with $331,000 in debt. Due to normal attrition over 8 years, you would have brought that down to $194,000. With the plan, guess what? We brought it to 0. So that gives you an idea of how much, we actually took $194,000 of debt and reduced it to zero in that same time frame. So this is what's called basically the accelerated debt reduction plan, and we cover 8 years. So we get rid of all of the debt in 8 years. We have what's called a game plan. And so this actually shows you year by year. This is kind of the 30,000 foot level, if you will. And so your monthly premium or annual premiums are $12,000. In 4 years, they dropped to $4,800. Again, if you kept this at $12,000, you would end up with a great deal more cash values in the system, or you could start a second policy, which is really what's most recommended by either purchasing your $12,000, which might have another $500,000 term in it, so you can convert it so you don't have to worry about reinsurability. As it turns out, of that money that we had allocated, and then $4,000 was available in year 5. So out of the miscellaneous account, we grabbed $800. That made the $4,800 premium. Show $91 from cash values, and we pulled $1,709 from them. We pulled all $4,800 values, because what happens is as you pay off these debts, especially debts like the house, you don't shift headwinds into tailwinds enough, and the loan is big enough that you don't have any money accumulating in the miscellaneous account. So again, this is the same table that you saw before, but here's one additional item. The Kia Soul in October of 23, we were able to pull $28,000 to set that aside and actually go pay cash for that. And then we set this up so that instead of just pulling it out, we actually set it up so that it is as if it's a loan from yourself to pay that back into your policy. So you set the conditions of that loan. Next, we show what the financial structuring is from your assets, and then if there's any additional amounts and what that ends up being here. Finally, the year by year, we show the cash values, what's available for debt, the debt reduction, how much we paid back the loan, what the balance was, if there was any, if we're accumulating anything in the miscellaneous account, and then if we left any money in the policy. And so in year 8, we actually left $54,000 in the policy. And here's just a table that shows those numbers as you move debt from the outside into the policy and then the total debt. And so you see here, the numbers just keep decreasing until they're gone. Okay. And then we have a step-by-step plan. This is step 1 through 6. That shows that there are 8 debts. We take the Kia Soul and we pay it off immediately, $44.73. That changes the headwind into a tailwind of $322, added to the $1,000 that we already had. And we had $47.18 available to be paid down on the visa of that. And then, of course, a couple disclosures. If not Series 6 and 7 licensed, then we have to disclose that they cannot give you advice on liquidating IRAs and 401ks and that type of stuff, because that's not what their difference would be if they did, and if they didn't, giving a client enough information to make that decision on their own. Next, the disclosure is that this is not a bank. Interestingly enough, one insurance company actually got sued because agents were calling this a bank because it's called the infinite banking concept. And as it turned out, the client was aggravated that he thought he was somehow getting a real bank. And so we had to come with this disclosure that it's not a bank, and there is interest that's going to get charged on the money that is pulled not from their account, but as a lien against it from the general fund. So we disclose that there's going to be an interest charged on the money that they borrow from their policy. Finally, we have a year by year, and I'm going to expand this so you can see month by month scenario. So hold on here a second. Okay, so what we do is we start off with the cash values available, 6586. Some companies prepay the interest. Again, we're worst case scenario. Most companies do not withhold 6%, so we wanted to overdo that so that you might end up with, probably will end up with more if they withhold the first year interest. Interestingly enough, in the early days, we said, oh, they get 61.91. Well, ended up because there was a less charge for the amount being withheld. They actually ended up with about $150 or $200 more than they had expected. They actually called the agent and said, hey, we got $200 more than what we expected. What are we supposed to do with that? And so that was a pleasant surprise. I think he told them to rent a limousine and go to dinner, go to a nice dinner and celebrate or something. So anyway, and then we added $3,000 in liquidated assets. So that gave them a total of $91.91 available to pay down debt. The Kia Soul, $44.73. That whole debt is now gone. We saved a whopping interest amount of $35. If you're far enough into these loans and you're at the end of them, and in this case we were pretty close to it, you don't save a lot of interest. There are other scenarios where you'll save a lot of interest, but this was not one of them. After the $44.73, we still had $47.18 available, or whatever this number is. So if you get something different than $91.91, you subtract out whatever the balance is you paid off. You take the remaining balance and put that towards the next debt. In this case, $47.18 from $49.82 brings the balance to just $264. You might say, well, I've got $264 in my account. I'll just go ahead and pay the whole thing off. If you don't, it will still, the system will calculate that, and this thing actually pays off in a couple months from just using that $47.18, bring the balance down, you make a couple payments, and voila, it's gone. $428. So we had, so all total, there was $1322. We had $1,000 a month coming back in from the assets. We paid off the Kia Soul, so now there's 32 or 322 added that to 1,000, so that gives you 1322. The Bank of America Visa, that a monthly amount was $260. So then the other contributions, which I talked about, making $1,000. So we see here $1322 a month coming back into the policy to pay this loan down. Well, in 2 months, we add in the $260 as it pays off the Visa from normal attrition after we paid it down. So this thing comes down to zero in 5 months. And so what you do is you take that overage and we say we put that into a miscellaneous account. Now what you could do, again, worst case scenario, we take this out and say you only pull a loan on it one time a year. Well, if you're a 6586 right here and you paid this off in 5 months, you could in fact pull 6586 out of this again and have it completely replenished, which means you could apply another 6586 to the next debt and still have this back paid up back down to zero by the time you get to the end of the year. So here we have accumulated 11,878, and we turn around and put that in. We have that available. So we have, you make the next year premiums 14,000, withhold 889, gives you 13. We had 11,000 available at the end of the year. Add those two together, and now you have $25,000 available to pay down debt. That starts getting rid of all kinds of things. So this MasterCard, it's gone. The next MasterCard, it's gone. And the charger was at $20,530 for a balance because you paid on it for a year. And we had 15,000 left over. We paid that down on the 20,000. That left you a balance. So you got rid of 2 debts and you reduced the charger down to $4614. Interestingly enough, at $760 a month, this Dodge Charger is going to pay off, according to the system, in January of 22. You're going to you saved $1,700 in that MasterCard, 501, and then the calculation savings for interest against the Charger was another $669. So again, we just add all those up. You end up with $2,178 coming back into the policy, loan of $14,818. It pays off back to zero in about 6 months. The Charger pays off, so we add $760, which was the tailwind or the headwind of the Charger. Add that $760 in here. Now you've started putting in $2,938 a month back into the policy. Well, this one's full, so guess what? It goes into that miscellaneous account I talked about. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you basically keep cycling through year after year after year. Oh, here's the one I do want to show you. Because we said we're going to buy a new Kia Soul, we actually set aside $28,000 in the miscellaneous account. You actually leave it in the policy, and you don't grab it until you need it. So here's $28,000 in October. We pull the money out of the policy, go buy the Kia Soul, and we said we're going to make that a loan to ourselves, and that was already set at $479 a month coming back into the policy. So you bought your Kia Soul based on you being the bank. You pay back yourself $479, so it now changes $3,837 a month coming back into the policy. Interestingly enough, that's enough that it drives the balance of the policy back to zero by month 11. So you put a little bit more back into the miscellaneous account, that carries over. And so you get that carryover into the next year. So anyway, it just shows out, maps every month by month, so you can see what the cash flow is, and you can follow that till finally you get to year, here we go, residence. In month 73, beginning of year 7, the balance of your residence is down to $61,000. We have $49,000 available from the policy. We put that against it, drives that down in one fell swoop down to $11,868. That is low enough that at $1,250 a month, that pays off in about 10 months. See here, it pays off right here. So we shift that headwind into a tailwind, add the $1,250 to $4,329. Now you've got a whopping $5,579 a month coming back into the policy, paying this loan down. As a matter of fact, it's so strong that at the end of year 7, you only have $1,200 left as an outstanding balance on the policy. We have enough from the policy loan, we can pull that out. We did have a little bit of a balance on the previous year loan, and so there was only $50,000 available. But guess what? We only needed $4,800 plus the $1,200. So basically, this gets left in the policy. Your loan was $63.83. You're putting in $55.79. So by month 2, it's paid off, and so your balance is zero. Now you're starting to accumulate cash. When you start seeing numbers like this being accumulated, it's time to start a second policy, so you build cash that you can then use for things like investing into, I don't know, duplexes and rental properties, or, you know, you can put it wherever it is that now makes you money, because when do banks make money? When they loan it. Well, why would you have money sitting here that you could leverage into additional incomes? So when you start seeing these kind of numbers, it's time to get an additional policy, or, as I mentioned at the beginning, you start with additional term riders. Now you can convert this into a paid up additions whole life policy with a high percentage of that being a paid up addition, because now because you started with a reasonable ratio to begin with, and now you can get this can be pretty strong because you're well into it, and you have the ability to dump a lot of this money back directly into the cash. And the nice thing about putting it in paid up additions is for every dollar you put into a paid up addition, you will get $3 worth of death benefit. So if you're looking to really build death benefits and maybe even leverage that into something during the retirement years, that just gives you a lot more leverage to be able to do that kind of stuff. The only thing we have left is I actually, if you like numbers, we actually have each one of the amortization tables, and if there is an acceleration and we actually leverage that money into the policy, into the debt, we actually show the breakdowns of each one of these if someone wanted to see it. As a client, most clients aren't interested in that. They just want to know what the bottom line is and to know that they have the confidence that it's available. But if anyone has said, well, I've got a CPA that'd like to see this, we have all the numbers. Unlike some systems that there's assumptions, we show transparently every single number that is needed to know and have the confidence that these are numbers that are right and that they're accurate. So I'm going to turn this back over to Paul. That's basically a presentation of the software, what it can do for you, and how powerful the banking system is. And what people don't realize is you get to use that money over and over and over, whereas typically if people go, I'm just going to pay that off, maybe in a snowball effect or something, they use that money and then it's gone. In this system, you get to leverage it over and over again, which is what amplifies what makes this work so well.
Wow, Nicholas. I'm sure most people, like I was in the very beginning when I first saw this, are just slightly overwhelmed with everything that's inside this. I mean, I know a lot of the questions that the people are watching this are having, and it's not super easy to understand in the beginning, but what you can see is there is a lot of good information that otherwise you'd never have in your financial arsenal, or be able to dissect what your life looks like, financially speaking, this year, next year, and 30 or 40 years down the road. So, before I'll start throwing out some questions that I'm sure some people have. But Dave, what kind of comments did you have?
Well, first off, Nicholas, thank you. Every time I see this, I'm just amazed of how this all works. And it's a fabulous program. And I'm just glad we have this tool to use. And I know you put a lot of work into it. One question I have real quick is, this looks great from a static standpoint. We put the plan together, but things change. Let's say you don't get it paid down on time. Let's say that life happens and you have to take on another debt in the middle of this. How do we figure that out?
Well, what agents typically do is, especially when they get started with a new client, they'll do a review in about 3 months to make sure they got things set up. They get their policy manager set up so that they take the first loan, make sure they apply that loan to the debts that we have scheduled. And so they do a review, maybe 3 months, 6 months into it. Then every year after that, they do another annual review where they get that data updated. And so if there's a new debt, we stick that into the system. And then we say what got paid off, and set in the headwinds that gets changed into tailwinds and the assets for additional funds being used. So we actually can more accurately set that up and show what this looks like with what they did or didn't accomplish at each stage at the time they said they would do it. And so now we know, because we know what debts they have, we know what their debt amounts are on each one of them, we know what their cash values are, we know what headwinds they've changed into tailwinds and whether they did that or not. And so we know what they're putting back into the policy. So then we can kind of reset it at zero, and then do eight more years going forward to show what that would do. So the key to this, really to stay on track, is to do at least an annual review and update everything as you go along.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Nicholas, I guess one of the first questions I would have that, the people that are watching this are going to have is this. We started this, obviously, we had a pretty large amount of debt to begin with, but we only came to the table with $12,000 a year for the first 4 years. And then we reduced it on the amount of deposits or policy premiums that we're paying. And so if you total that up, it's certainly less than the amount of debt that you see on here. So could you just kind of do a little clarification on why and how that works?
Sure. Part of it is that, again, the recycling that I was talking about. So normally when you pay a debt off, according to Nelson in his book, he talks about the Parkinson's law. And so normally people go, okay, I'm going to pay this debt off. Well, then they end up with an extra $300 a month. Well, what do they do with that? They typically squander it, right? The expenses rise to meet income. And so if you find yourself an extra $300 a month, you'll find some place to spend that. They typically don't use that and leverage it to pay down another debt. Just because, I don't know if it's human nature or what, but that ends up being kind of a way to, the system actually is built in. So it's kind of forced savings. And because we have a plan, now you know what to do with that so you don't waste it. In Nelson's book, he talks about use it or lose it, right? And if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And so this system kind of forces you into the use it aspect of it. So in the system, while we only spent $67,000 in total premiums, we did have $1,000 a month that we were putting back in. So that's $12,000 a year. So that gives you an additional $96,000 that we were using it for $144,000. Other than the $251 that I added in to make it an even $1,000, this money was already money being spent somewhere. We just redirected it so you could leverage it, and you leverage it not once, but every month for 96 months. Then on top of that, when you get rid of all of this headwind, these numbers start changing, right? So you end up with $4,100 of headwind that we changed into tailwind. Well, other than the $1,250, which took us till month 83 to pay off, if you take $1,250 from $4,100, you're right around what? $3,800, $3,900. I'm sorry, $2,800 to $2,900 a month that you're getting to recycle. Well, again, normally this would have just been gone. Once you pay these off, you just either accumulate more money or more debt on these cards. You go out and buy another car, which we did set up for another Kia. We did buy another car. We could have set up and bought another car because we changed this 760. The system can actually take this 760 and terminate it when this normally would have expired in 40 months. And then you set it up and go, all right, we're going to buy another car. We're going to set aside 760 because that's what we just freed up. So it recycles this. And when you start looking at the amount of money that when you recycle, or what we call changing headwinds into tailwinds, that becomes extremely powerful. And it just kind of has an amplifying effect that people don't realize can happen until they see it happen in a system like this that clearly spells out how to utilize it.
Right. So very, very good. Thank you. So just to encompass what you said, we're not stopping our payments of all of our ongoing debt going forward. And so there's that going forward, plus the available cash value in the policy that we're depositing, or our premiums are due each year. We're using that money and the ongoing payments that we've always been doing and paying as we go forward every month. So all that money is kind of like in one big pot, and we're just pushing it forward, just mowing down or reducing all of our debt going forward, right?
Correct. And one of the pieces I didn't really talk about is that in these policies, I start with a penny at the end of every day, whatever my pay. and by the end of 30 days, you end up with, $3.5 million. But if on day 2 you spend one of those pennies, you lose about $1.5 million. And so the fact of compounding interest, Einstein said the eighth wonder of the world should have been compounding interest. And that's what is built into these policies with a 4% compounding rate. Even when you pull the money out, what looks like out of your policy, of course, it comes out of the general fund, and they do a lease against or a lien against your balance. So that leaves your balance in place. And then you get the compounding 4% plus the dividend on top of that. And so that's what makes these things so powerful. That's why the wealthiest have been leveraging these kinds of policies for over 250 years to build massive amounts of wealth they can pass on generation to generation.
So the what's key with infinite banking is you secede from the fiat money system that's out there, because the alternative, which we're all used to, is taking our money and putting it in a 401k and locking it up for unknown number of years, not knowing what the end game looks like, and then having to go someplace else and financing our life going forward in time. And how ridiculous is that? But we lose complete control of our money in that system. And what we've got here, and Nicholas is showing perfectly how infinite banking works in a real-time application, where you're taking all your money, instead of putting it in their system, you're putting it in your own. And then you've got everything you need to finance your life and to develop a legacy tool that nothing can compare to. And you pretty much just separate yourself from the rest of the financial world, knowing you can take this money once it's in the system and then go invest it in other things like real estate or stocks or whatever it is you want. This just makes it so simple. And with Nicholas's software that we use, that it just makes the whole thing kind of bulletproof. You can see everything about your financial life. Dave?
I agree. And the trick with all this is, the first time you see it, and I remember the first time I saw this, I was like, oh, that just can't work. But it really does work. And it's a matter of, when you see the numbers on the page, it's like, it'll work, and we have a plan. And that's always been, the hardest thing. Everybody always says you should have a budget, you should do these things. But having this down where in black and white, it shows you, I owe this, I have this, I have the policy on top of this, and this is what we can do with it, becomes the miracle of compounding really here. Because, when you're looking at is a tailwind, in excess of $5,000 after 8 years, when before we saw this, you're looking at a 30-year mortgage. And the rest of the world looks at it that way. And to have the power to do this is amazing. This is amazing software, but the whole concept, infinite banking concept, and that's why we're such proponents of it, is really, it's a miracle all unto itself.
So, one of the things it really is, and how many of us pay attention to how much money we put in our taxes that are taken out of our paychecks every time we get paid? It's like there's a tremendous amount gone, and we don't even know how much interest that we're even paying out. Typically, we just agree to the terms and we just start writing those checks every month. And I mean, when you can see the amount of interest that you save right here in front of you, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I mean, it just makes that pendulum swing from one side to the other and go, oh my gosh, all that money that you're paying somebody else is never working for anybody, not working for you, me, or whoever has a policy or the system. We're just out there giving it away. Like, we're just happy to do it. Once you see this, who doesn't like capturing all that back in your pocket? It's just amazing. I'm just blown away. And, as flexible as this product is, you can come back in and change it 1,000 times going forward in your life. So if you have an additional product or something else you purchase, you want to put it into the system and see, what it's going to take to get, it paid off and paid down or paid cash or however to recapture all that money back in your own system. You could see it in black and white, and you can redo it as often as you want. But one of the questions that was just posted was this: is this a system, a piece of software for just
I
the
mean, let's talk
client?
about.
I'm sorry.
Nash.
Is this just for the practitioner, like Dave and myself, or is this for the client's use? The practitioners, Dave and myself, own this software, so we use it, but it's for our clients. So if the clients want to engage with this, we can
Right.
certainly use it to help you, if that makes sense. And Nicholas, did you have something?
Now we
Uh,
in a lot of the
You're
what do you
breaking
call
up,
it?
Nicholas. You
You
want to
guys hear
start
me
all
okay?
over? No. You want to start all over?
Yeah. Let me start. In our presentations, we talked about the headwinds and we talked about compounding interest. And so one of the questions that's asked is, let's say you're a good steward of your money and you save up $30,000. You go to your bank and you say, hey, Mr. Banker, I'm going to pull my $30,000 out. I'm going to go buy a car and pay cash for it. That way I'm going to save my interest. And Mr. Banker says to you, hold on a second, Paul, let's do this. Why don't we take that $30,000, let's put that into a CD for 4 years, and I'm going to pay you a whopping 4% interest. And Paul's thinking, wow, that's pretty sweet. But how can I pay for my car if I do that? He says, well, what we're going to do is we'll loan you the $30,000 and we're going to put the lien against charge you 6% interest. What do you think most people answer? Dave?
I missed all that because you froze on me, Nicholas.
Oh,
so-
I'm sorry. Let me go over it again then.
Okay, good. Thanks.
That's a good dodge on my part to not do public school math, isn't it?
I didn't hear it.
I'm sitting here thinking, is it my connection? Is it your connection? And I'm like, I'm just going to wait and see. And then all of a sudden it's like, what do you think, Dave? I'm like, say that again though, and we'll see. We had the 4% CD, and did you say a 6% bank loan?
Yeah, and then the bank is going to put a lien against your CD for $30,000, give it so you go buy your car, and they're going to only charge you 6% on the bank loan. Is that a good deal for you, or is that a good deal for the banker?
Well, it's a fabulous deal for the banker, as we know from our discussion about interest rates last week. But it's not a great deal for you in the sense that you're probably going to make a little bit of money, but your opportunity costs are lost. You'd be making better somewhere else.
Well, most people, because 6% is bigger than 4%, invariably they say that's a good deal for the banker.
Yes.
When you do the math, you come out about $350 ahead, which means that it didn't cost you anything for interest. So you are ahead of the guy who just took a loan against the car and paid the interest over that 4 years. But because of our training, we invariably jump to 6% is bigger than 4, so that's a better deal for the banker. It's really not, but we're conditioned to do that. That 4% in the CD is what we have ongoing in these policies, and that's what makes these things so strong. So even though you're paying 5% interest against the loan, it's growing by 4%, which you never break that compounding interest.
And Nicholas, I'm glad you brought that up, because we had this same discussion last week in our group here about how you can be paying what appears to be a higher interest rate while earning a lower interest rate and still end up with a positive outcome at the end. And that's exactly what we're tracking on the same path here.
Good.
Well, it's really cool because we're paying simple interest to the insurance company, and they're paying us uninterrupted compounding for life on every cent that we put through it. I mean, that's a huge difference.
Sure.
Yep. What other
So
questions
do
do we have?
any of your guests have any questions?
Yeah, let's throw some out there. I'm sure they do. You can unmute yourself if you'd like, or type, your choice.
Okay. Everybody's being shy tonight. So
They are. What's up with that?
I
mean, it's just amazing. Either that or they completely understand this, which,
yeah, well,
you know, we hang out with very smart people, Dave.
So what we will going forward, we had the question, do we want to do this? You know, if you want to schedule a time with Paul or myself to get together and just start working on this, we will start this process with you. It's an eye opener because it gives you a plan. And that's, you know, I've always, most people don't have a plan. I love having a plan. And this is a good start for that.
Sure. Dave Bedford, you have a question.
Yes, sir. Is this a software that you use with when somebody just comes to you, like, you know, first or second meeting with them, or is this, you know, when do you pull out the software and actually use this?
Well, it just kind of depends. And it typically, I mean, after they read our book and then we have a conversation with them, it's probably the second conversation that we would have with them after the first meeting, where we really kind of talk about, you know, what they want with this whole process. And then we send an intake request to them and they fill it out and then we get it back. And then we process it, and then we can come to them with a game plan rather than having them come to us and say, I have X number of dollars that I can allocate to this system, when they probably have a whole lot more. And the system is designed and set up to help them discover exactly that. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And yes, it's being recorded. Somebody else asked that question.
Yes, and I will, depending on my schedule tomorrow, we'll have it up on our website and on our YouTube channel, hopefully by Wednesday morning. I'll send out an email to all of you and just let you know what's up if you want to see it again.
Sure, that'd be awesome. Well, if nobody else has any questions, guys, Nicholas, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening out there on the West Coast. You're free to go, and you know, it's always great. It's always great to hang out with the Eagles. And Nicholas, you're certainly one of them. You're one of the smartest guys I know, and I'm glad to have you in my camp, man. It's just awesome, right, Dave?
Absolutely. I want to thank you again, Nicholas, for taking the time to spend with us this evening. It's amazing stuff, and it's just fun to see you demonstrated, because it's it makes me realize I got some work to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, because you know, I didn't name it the infinite banking concept, but because it has so many infinitely numbers of moving pieces in it, it can be very difficult to understand. Hopefully the software kind of pares it down to 3 moving parts: your assets, your policy, and your debts. Of course, each of those have basically unlimited number of pieces to it, but basically there's 3 parts to it. And once you get that as an understanding, it falls into place a little bit better. It's been my pleasure to be with you guys. Yeah, I worked with you guys for a number of years, and so it's exciting to see you guys reaching out and helping people, and that the software is helping you guys help those people. So I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Nicholas.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Soon.
Hi.
Everybody else, have a great night, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
See you guys. Thanks.